Welcome to Soul Stories, your home for heart-touching tales of love, hope, and second chances. If you believe in the power of kindness and the magic of unexpected connections, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing family. Now let's begin today's story. Lucian Thorne stepped out of his Rolls-Royce Phantom, the polished leather of his shoes tapping against the stone-paved street of the Lower East Side's Art District. The late autumn evening air was crisp, laced with the scent of spray paint and the faint rhythm of lo-fi music echoing from a nearby corner. He adjusted the collar of his bespoke suit jacket, his eyes scanning the crowd. Street artists, hipsters with dyed green hair, and curious wanderers like himself who didn't quite belong here. Lucian wasn't part of this world. He was here looking for inspiration, or more accurately, to ensure his next luxury complex didn't get branded soulless like his last few projects had been. A graffiti mural on an old brick wall caught his eye. The strokes were wild and unrestrained, the colors exploding like raw emotion. But underneath it all was something aching. He tilted his head, trying to analyze it. "Not bad," he murmured, his voice low and sharp like the way he signed off on multi-million-dollar deals. "Not bad," a biting voice cut in from behind. "That's the worst compliment I've ever heard, Mr. Fancy Suit." Lucian turned, brow slightly raised. Standing in front of him was a girl, or rather a storm in human form. Wren Callahan, though he didn't yet know her name, stood there with messy brown hair tied high, a paint-streaked oversized hoodie, and scuffed combat boots. One hand held a spray can, the other resting on her hip, her eyes gleaming with defiance. She looked like she just stepped out of the wall itself, vivid, untamed, and impossible to ignore. "Mr. Fancy Suit?" Lucian repeated, voice cold as ice. "How old are you to be calling me that?" "Old enough to know your suit costs more than an apartment in this neighborhood," she shot back with a smirk, "and young enough to call you Mr. Fancy Suit if you act like a soulless machine." Lucian stiffened. No one talked to him like that. He was Lucian Thorne, the man behind glass towers scraping the sky, the man whose snap of a finger could silence an entire boardroom. But this girl, with her sharp brown eyes and half-smile, seemed not to care in the slightest who he was. "You painted this?" he asked, gesturing to the graffiti. "Sure did. And if you're planning to buy it to hang in some glossy office, sorry, it's not for sale." Wren crossed her arms, scanning him from head to toe. "People like you wouldn't understand it anyway." Lucian let out a dry chuckle, an unusual sound even for him. "People like me? You don't know anything about me." "Oh, let me guess." Wren leaned in, her tone teasing. "You're the type who thinks everything has a price, right? Land, homes, art, hell, even people. You walk in here, look at us like we're street rats, and think you can buy the soul of this place to build something shiny and soulless." Lucian frowned, not in anger, but in astonishment. She was disturbingly accurate. He was, in fact, planning to turn this neighborhood into a commercial complex, five-star hotel, penthouses, and a luxury mall designed for the elite. But hearing her say it out loud suddenly made it feel hollow. "You're pretty sharp," he said, his voice softening slightly. "But if you hate people like me so much, why are you still standing here talking?" Wren shrugged, tossing her spray can in the air and catching it with ease. "Because you're standing in front of my painting, and I don't like anyone looking at it like they're about to appraise it." Lucian looked at her, really looked, not like a business partner or a promising investment. There was something about her different. Not the polished beauty he was used to at high-end galas, but a raw, fiery life force that could burn down everything he knew. And for the first time in years, Lucian felt something stir. Curiosity, a sensation he thought he'd long outgrown. "What's your name?" he asked, barely realizing he'd said it aloud. Wren raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting the question. "Wren Callahan. And you, Mr. Fancy Suit?" "Lucian Thorne," he replied, waiting for the usual reaction. Surprise, reverence, maybe even flattery. But Wren just smirked. "Sounds like the name of a Hollywood villain," she said, turning away with a wave. "Bye, Lucian Thorne. Don't ruin my neighborhood." She walked off, leaving Lucian standing there, one hand in his pocket, eyes fixed on her retreating figure. He didn't know why, but something about the way she called him a walking suit with no soul made him want to prove her wrong. Or worse, made him want to see her again. As he got back into the car, the streetlight cast long shadows through the window, and Lucian murmured to himself, "Wren Callahan, you'll be seeing me again." Wren Callahan sat on an old wooden crate in the alley behind the Arts District, her brush moving swiftly across the worn surface of a skateboard. Blue and red paint splattered wildly, as if she were trying to paint out her rage. It had been 3 days since her encounter with the slick-suited man, Lucian Thorne, a name that sounded like it had been ripped straight out of a B-list superhero movie. She couldn't shake the image of his eyes, cold but laced with something else, curiosity. "Don't ruin my neighborhood," she had said, and she genuinely hoped he'd listened. But deep down, Wren knew people like him never really cared. The sharp click of high heels on pavement pulled her out of her thoughts. A woman in a gray suit with her hair pulled into a tight bun appeared at the mouth of the alley, holding an iPad like a shield. "Miss Callahan?" the woman asked, her tone polite but rigid. Wren raised an eyebrow and set her brush down. "Who's asking?" "I'm Elise, Mr. Lucian Thorne's assistant. He'd like to meet with you." Wren burst out laughing, the sound echoing down the alley. "Mr. Fancy Suit? Oh, no thanks. I don't play fetch for bored billionaires." Elise didn't blink. "Mr. Thorne has a job offer. He wants to hire you as a community liaison for his new development project." Wren stopped laughing. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Community liaison? Sounds like a fancy way to say he wants me as a human shield while he guts the neighborhood. Tell your boss I'm not interested." Elise pressed her lips together, clearly unused to being turned down. "Mr. Thorne is serious. He believes your perspective could add value to the project. You'd be generously compensated." "Oh, I bet," Wren said, standing and wiping paint on her ripped jeans. "So generously I'd forget you're planning to evict hundreds of poor families just to build penthouses for the elite, right?" Elise opened her mouth to respond, but Wren had already turned away, grabbing her skateboard and walking off. "Tell him to find someone else. I'm just a street rat, not some rich man's puppet." Lucian sat in his office on the 72nd floor of Thorne Tower, the light from the floor to ceiling windows casting long lines across his face. In front of him sat a 3D model of the future complex, gleaming towers, infinity pools, and an arts center he hoped would soften accusations of his work being soulless. But his mind wasn't on the model. It was in that alley with the girl whose tangled hair and burning eyes threatened to set his whole world ablaze. "She said no," Elise reported, standing at his desk. "She called herself a street rat and said she's not a puppet." Lucian smirked, a rare expression. "Street rat," he repeated as if savoring the phrase. "She's right. She's not a puppet. That's exactly why I want her." Elise frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, I don't understand. Miss Callahan has no credentials, no experience, and she clearly doesn't respect you. Why her?" Lucian rose and walked to the window, gazing out at the glittering city below. "Because she's the only person with the guts to call me a soulless machine to my face. I need that perspective, Elise. I need someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth, even when it hurts." Elise sighed, clearly unconvinced but too professional to argue. "What would you like me to do next?" "Find her, bring her here, and this time tell her the project won't destroy her neighborhood, at least not entirely. I want her to believe she can make a difference." Wren didn't expect to see Elise again, especially not at the rundown community center on the corner, where she was helping a group of kids paint a graffiti mural on the wall. But when Elise appeared, this time holding an envelope instead of an iPad, Wren knew things had gotten serious. "Mr. Thorne asked me to give you this," Elise said, handing her the envelope. Wren opened it, scanning the typed letter on Thorne Enterprises' letterhead. The message was brief. Lucian was offering her a position as the working-class representative to help ensure his project wouldn't erase the history and soul of the neighborhood. She'd have the power to give input on the design, propose community spaces, and even oversee the relocation process for families. The pay? A figure so high, Wren nearly dropped the letter. "What the hell is this?" Wren muttered. Is this guy insane? Elise gave a faint smile. Mr. Thorne isn't insane. He's curious about you, and he believes you can help. Wren stuffed the letter into her pocket, suspicion burning in her eyes. She didn't trust Lucian Thorne. People like him always had hidden agendas. But then she looked at the kids laughing near the mural, thought of the families in this neighborhood, the ones who had given her a home when she had nothing after her mother died. If she said no, who would fight for them? Who would make sure they weren't kicked out? Fine, Wren said firmly. I'll do it, but not for the money, and definitely not for your boss. I'm doing it for this neighborhood, and if he thinks he can buy me, he's going to regret it. Elise nodded, visibly relieved. I'll schedule the meeting at his office for Monday. Wren smirked, picking up her skateboard. Good, but tell him I'm showing up as me. No suits, no sugarcoating, and if he doesn't like it, that's his problem. As Elise walked away, Wren glanced up at the night sky, her heart thudding faster than usual. She didn't know why, but the thought of facing Lucian Thorne again made her both nervous and excited. Watch out, Mr. Fancy Suit, she muttered. I'm coming to mess up your world. Wren Callahan stood in front of Thorne Tower, craning her neck to take in the gleaming panels of glass stabbing into the sky. The building looked like a spaceship from another planet, cold, distant, and exactly the kind of place Lucian Thorne, Mr. Fancy Suit himself, would call home. She wore ripped jeans with holes at the knees, a faded indie band t-shirt, and her messy brown hair was tied back with a stretched-out elastic. Tucked under her arm was her scuffed-up skateboard. What the hell am I doing here, she muttered, then took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby of Thorne Enterprises was a symphony of luxury, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and employees gliding past in tailored suits like programmed robots. Wren felt like a fish flung into the middle of a desert. The receptionist, a blonde with a perfect blowout, eyed her from head to toe, visibly baffled. Do you have an appointment? Yup, Wren smirked, slapping her skateboard down on the counter with a loud clack that made the girl jump. Wren Callahan, with your big boss, Lucian Thorne. The woman quickly typed something into her computer, then handed Wren a visitor badge, her eyes still glued to the paint-splattered boots. 72nd floor. Elevator's that way. As Wren stepped into the elevator, she caught her reflection in the steel doors. Good luck, street rat, she muttered and hit the button. The 72nd floor felt like another universe. Lucian's office was as big as a soccer field, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Manhattan. A team of staff buzzed around a gleaming 3D model of the complex, others tapping on tablets and analyzing data. When Wren walked in, the room practically held its breath. A guy in a gray suit dropped his coffee. An older woman adjusted her glasses and stared like Wren had landed from Mars. Lucian stood at the far end, hands in his pockets, listening to an assistant's update. He wore a navy suit without a wrinkle, his black hair styled like he'd stepped off the cover of Forbes. When he looked up and saw her, a flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by a knowing, amused smile. Miss Callahan, he said, voice smooth and low. I didn't think you'd actually come. Wren shrugged, dropping her skateboard to the floor with a thud that made a few people flinch. Didn't want to, Mr. Fancy Suit, but I'm here for my neighborhood, not for you. Lucian motioned for his team to leave. Within seconds, the room was empty, leaving only the two of them and the gleaming model at the center of the table. He walked closer, his eyes sweeping over her, messy hair, worn boots. You know, this is the first time anyone's brought a skateboard into my office. And probably the last if you're planning to turn my neighborhood into a Disneyland for rich people, Wren replied, arms crossed. Let's cut to the chase. What do you want from me? A mascot to make your project look less evil? Lucian raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to being challenged on his home turf. He pointed to the model. This is the complex, 5-star hotel, luxury condos, and art center. I want your input, especially on how to preserve the soul of the neighborhood, as you called it. Wren stepped forward and leaned over the model. Sparkling glass towers, no trace of the old brick alleys, the graffiti murals, or the community center that had once given her hope in her darkest days. She looked up, eyes sharp as blades. This doesn't preserve the soul. This erases memories and history. You think a shiny art center makes up for displacing hundreds of families? Lucian's lips pressed together, but he didn't get angry. Instead, he tilted his head, curiosity flashing in his eyes. You make me sound like a Hollywood villain. I'm not evicting anyone, Ren. I'm relocating them, with better living conditions. Oh, how generous, Ren scoffed, leaning on the table. You dump them in some far-off slum and call it relocation, then pat yourself on the back. Have you ever lived in a place where every corner tells a story? Or do you only know how to count money and build glass? Lucian laughed, a deep, warm sound that even surprised him. You really are a storm, Ren Callahan. I'm beginning to see why I hired you. Ren frowned, unsure whether he was mocking her or giving a compliment. Don't try to charm me, Mr. Fancy Suit. I'm here to make sure you don't destroy everything I care about. And I'm here to prove you wrong, Lucian replied, stepping closer. The distance between them shrank, and Ren suddenly caught the scent of his cologne, sandalwood with a hint of bergamot, refined but not overpowering. She stepped back, heart pounding for no reason she could name. Fine, she said, her tone stiff to mask her unease. You want me to work? Show me the relocation plan. I want to see exactly what you're doing with the people being affected. Lucian nodded and gestured to a sleek leather chair. She ignored it, choosing to stand, skateboard still tucked under her arm. He opened a file on his tablet and handed it to her. This is the preliminary plan. New housing, financial support, and job priority within the complex. Ren skimmed through it, her expression softening slightly. The plan was better than she expected, but she still didn't trust it. Sounds good on paper, but I want to see it happen, and I want the community center preserved. It's not just a building, Lucian. It's the heart of the neighborhood. He looked at her, really looked, like he was trying to decipher a complicated painting. You actually care, don't you? Not for money, not for clout, just for that place. Ren shrugged, turning her face away so he wouldn't see the flicker of emotion in her eyes. What's so weird about that? Not everyone lives in a gilded cage like you. Lucian was silent for a moment, then smiled. Not the usual polite smirk, but something genuine that lit up his whole face. You know, Ren, you might be the only person here who makes me want to be better. Ren shot him a glare, but the corner of her mouth twitched up. Don't get your hopes up, Mr. Fancy Suit. I still don't like you. Not yet, Lucian said, voice dropping lower, eyes locking on hers. But I'll change your mind. She shook her head, muttering something about egotistical billionaires. But as she walked out of the office, Ren couldn't deny it. Lucian Thorne, for all his arrogance, was starting to make her curious. Dangerously so. Lucian Thorne sat in his office, the golden hue of sunset spilling across the towering glass windows. He had sent Ren an invitation to dinner at Le Ciel, the most luxurious French restaurant in Manhattan, under the pretense of a work discussion. But if he was being honest, he wasn't entirely sure why he did it. Maybe it was the way she glared at him during their last meeting, calling him Mr. Fancy Suit with that infuriating half-smile. Maybe it was because she was the only person who dared to challenge him without an ounce of fear. Whatever the reason, Lucian knew tonight would be anything but boring. Ren, as expected, showed up to Le Ciel like a whirlwind. She walked in wearing a battered leather jacket, ripped jeans, and combat boots splattered with red and yellow paint. A gray beanie sat atop her head, and when she pulled it off, her messy brown hair spilled out. The entire restaurant, filled with guests in evening gowns and bespoke suits, turned to look. The maître d', a frail man in a tuxedo, nearly dropped his menu. Do you have a reservation? He asked, voice trembling. Ren smirked. Yup, with Lucian Thorne. Bet he's waiting to show off that ego the size of his skyscraper. Lucian, seated at a corner table with a view of the Hudson, chuckled when he heard her. He stood and gestured to the host. She's with me. Ren walked over, her eyes sweeping across Lucian's perfectly tailored black silk suit. You look like you sold your soul to the devil in exchange for that thing, she said, flopping into her chair without even glancing at the menu. And you look like you just escaped a punk rock show, Lucian replied, his eyes twinkling. But I won't complain. You make this room a lot less dull. Dinner began with red wine and appetizers Ren referred to as expensive tiny food. The conversation, unsurprisingly, quickly turned into verbal sparring. I reviewed your relocation plan, Wren said, pointing at him with her fork. Still no real community center. What you call public space is just playgrounds for the rich. Lucian sipped his wine, never taking his eyes off her. And what would you suggest? That I build a graffiti warehouse so you and your friends can spray paint freely? At least it would have soul, Wren shot back. You live in this gold-plated world, Lucian, but do you actually live? Or do you just exist, counting money and signing contracts, never feeling a damn thing? Lucian froze, his usual smirk fading. No one had ever asked him that, no one dared. You judge me like you know me, he said, his voice lowering. But you're not that different, Wren. You stand there criticizing everything I do. But do you have any real solutions beyond painting walls and complaining? Wren narrowed her eyes, her temper flaring. But then she laughed. It was a clear, unfiltered sound that made a few diners turn their heads. Touché, Mr. Fancy Suit. You win this round. But I'm not here to solve your problems. I'm here to remind you that neighborhood isn't your damn playground. Lucian looked at her. Really looked. Under the soft lighting, her brown eyes glowed, not just with defiance, but with unshakable passion. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met, not like the polished women from his high society circles who smiled to please. Wren was real, fierce, and dangerous. You know, he said, leaning in, voice dropping, I'm starting to think hiring you was both the worst and best decision I've made. Wren raised an eyebrow and took a sip of wine. Worst because I drive you crazy, right? And best because... Lucian smiled slowly, meaningfully. Because you make me want to argue with you every day. Wren rolled her eyes, but the corners of her mouth curved upward. When dinner ended, they stepped out into the cold Manhattan night. Lucian offered her a ride, but Wren shook her head and hopped onto her skateboard. Thanks for dinner, devil in silk, she said with a wink, but I've got myself covered. As she rolled away, Lucian stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her disappear into the city. For the first time in years, his heart pounded, not over a deal, not over victory, but because of a girl in paint-splattered boots. Wren stood in front of the community center, her heart clenched tight. The old brick wall, once covered in graffiti and life, was now surrounded by steel fencing and a glaring sign, Eviction Zone. The roar of an excavator echoed from the next block, tearing through her memories like a blade. This place had once been her light in the darkest days, where Mrs. Rosa, the center's director, had pulled her from the edge of addiction after her mother's death. Wren gripped her skateboard, fury blazing in her eyes. Lucian had promised to protect the soul of the neighborhood. But this was betrayal. She stormed into Thorn Tower without warning. When she burst into the conference room, Lucian was mid-presentation, standing before a cluster of investors, selling his vision of the future. Wren didn't care. She slammed her skateboard onto the table, startling everyone. You lied, she growled, pointing a trembling finger at Lucian. You said you'd protect the neighborhood, but you're destroying the community center. That place means everything to me. Lucien's brow furrowed. He raised a hand, dismissing the room. One by one, the investors filed out, casting glances back at the furious girl in combat boots. When the room emptied, he stepped toward her, his voice calm but heavy. Wren, I didn't know the center was part of the eviction zone. I'll look into it. Look into it, she snapped, her voice cracking with emotion. You don't get it, Lucian. That place isn't just a building. It saved me when I had nothing. After my mom died, I nearly OD'd. That center, they gave me a reason to live. She turned away, blinking back tears, refusing to let him see her fall apart. Lucian stood still, shaken. He'd never seen Wren like this. Not sharp-tongued or defiant, but broken. And it hit him harder than any deal gone wrong. He took a breath, his voice raspier than usual. I understand. Wren shot him a bitter glare, wiping her face. Understand? What would you understand, penthouse prince? What do you know about loss? Lucian stepped closer, his eyes no longer distant or guarded. I understand, Wren, because I had nothing too. He paused as if wrestling with his past. I grew up in an orphanage. No family, no name. Just a number on a chart. Everything I have now, I built from nothing, but I've never forgotten what it felt like to be empty. Wren blinked, stunned. Lucian Thorne, the most powerful man in Manhattan, had once been a nameless child. She wanted to scoff, to call it a lie, but his eyes, dark and raw, made her fall silent. I'm not telling you this for pity, Lucian continued, his voice gentler now. I'm telling you because I never meant to destroy something important to you. I'll stop the demolition, I promise. Wren stared at him, heart thudding. For the first time, she didn't see Mr. Fancy Suit or the devil in silk, but a man with scars of his own. She nodded slowly, her voice quiet. Thank you. But if you tear that place down, I swear I'll burn your whole tower to the ground. Lucian laughed, the sound rich and disarming, breaking the heavy air between them. I believe you would, Wren Callahan. As she left the office, something shifted inside her. A strange connection to Lucian that went beyond the usual tension or banter. It was something unseen, stitched from shared wounds and battles neither had ever voiced aloud. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. Wren Callahan never imagined she'd find herself standing in a luxury boardroom, arguing with a billionaire over saving a corner of the city covered in graffiti. But here she was, week 3 of working with Lucian Thorne. And every day it felt like her world was slipping off its axis. Lucian, with his tailored suits and ice-cold eyes, made her want to scream, and made her want to look at him just a little longer. It was maddening. Tonight they were working late, just the two of them, and a pile of relocation plans spread across the table. Wren, in her paint-stained hoodie and familiar combat boots, pointed at one design with sharp precision. If you really want to preserve the community center, she said, then don't shove it in a corner like some forgotten leftover. It needs space, Lucian. It needs to breathe. Lucian, sleeves rolled up, leaned over the table, so close Wren could smell his sandalwood cologne. And I told you I will make it happen, he replied, voice low but steady. But you have to give me time, Wren. This isn't just about painting a wall and calling it done. Wren shot him a glare, but her lips curled slightly. Oh, please, Mr. Fancy Suit. Don't pretend you understand art. You just know how to sign checks and build glass towers. Lucian chuckled, the sound warm and disarming, enough to make Wren's heart stumble. You know, he said, I'm starting to enjoy your insults. They're honest. She turned away, pretending to study the floor plans, trying to hide the warmth rising to her cheeks. She hated the way he made her feel, like she was on a skateboard with no control. She hated his cold logic, the way he ran everything like a machine. But she couldn't deny that when he smiled, really smiled, she wanted to see it again. As the office lights dimmed, they moved to a leather sofa near the window. Lucian poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a sleek bar cart and handed her one. No work talk, he said, sitting across from her. Just conversation. Who are you, Wren Callahan, besides the girl who keeps threatening to burn down my tower? Wren took a sip, eyes gleaming with challenge. I'm a street artist, a rebel, and your personal nightmare. What about you? Who are you, Lucian Thorne, besides the CEO with the perfect jawline and a god complex? Lucian fell quiet, gazing into his glass as if the answer lay in the amber liquid. I don't really know anymore, he admitted, voice rough. But lately I've realized something. I need to see you smile every day. And I don't know why. Wren froze, her glass hovering midair. His words hit her like a stone cast into still water. She wanted to laugh, to call him the devil in silk and kill the moment, but his eyes, dark, steady, sincere, held her still. They began to argue again, as always, about everything from the relocation plans to how he described French appetizers as elegant bites. But this time, there was something different. Every glance, every word hummed with electricity. When Wren got up to retrieve another drawing, she clipped the edge of the table. Lucian caught her instantly, his hand closing around her arm. Time seemed to stop. They stood there barely an inch apart, their breaths mingling. Lucian's gaze locked onto hers, and Wren could feel her heartbeat pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. He leaned in, closer, closer still, and she knew exactly what was about to happen. A part of her wanted it to. But then she remembered who he was, what he controlled, what he could destroy with just a signature. She pulled away, her voice trembling. No, Lucian, I'm not doing this. Before he could speak, Ren grabbed her skateboard and rushed out of the office, leaving Lucian standing there, his heart pounding, for something he'd never felt before. Ren stood outside the community center, heart splintering as she watched the scene unfold. Steel fencing still wrapped around the building, but now bulldozers had started tearing into the graffiti-covered wall, the very one she and the kids had painted together. Just a week ago, Lucian had promised to protect this place. Just a week ago, she believed him. Not the CEO, but the man named Lucian, the one who'd opened up about his lonely childhood. But now it all felt like a lie. She had learned the truth from a headline that morning. Thorn Enterprises approve full redevelopment of Lower East Side. Despite Lucian's promises, he had signed off on the project. The article cited pressure from shareholders. It felt like a knife to the gut. She had trusted him, let him into her world, and he'd betrayed her. She stormed into his office without knocking. Lucian was seated behind his desk, eyes heavy with exhaustion, a pile of documents in front of him. He stood when he saw her, but Ren raised a hand to stop him. Don't, she said, her voice colder than steel. You promised, Lucian. You said you'd protect the community center, but you chose money, just like every other rich guy. Lucian drew in a breath and stepped closer. Ren, it's not what you think. I didn't have a choice. The shareholders... Shareholders? She cut him off, her eyes wet with fury. Don't blame them. You're Lucian Thorn. You run everything, but you chose to destroy the one place that saved me. The one place hundreds of people call home. You're nothing but a machine, Lucian. I was wrong to think you had a heart. Her words landed like a blow to his chest. He wanted to explain, to tell her he had fought the board, that he was trying to save the center through back channels. But when he looked into her eyes, shining with betrayal, he knew no excuse could make this right. Ren, I quit, she said, tossing her security badge onto his desk. I'm done with you. Done with this project. Goodbye, Lucian. She turned and walked out, leaving Lucian standing there, feeling, for the first time in his life, like he'd lost something that truly mattered. The next day, rain poured over Manhattan in relentless sheets. Lucian stood outside the community center, coat soaked, suit abandoned. He'd canceled his board meeting to be here, to find her. Ren sat in an alley nearby, hunched over her skateboard, painting through the storm. Her eyes were empty. When she saw him, she stood, gripping the board like a shield. What are you doing here? She asked, voice flat. Ren, Lucian's voice caught. His hair was plastered to his forehead, rain dripping from his jaw. For the first time, he wasn't a CEO. He wasn't in control. He was just Lucian, someone who'd let the most important person walk away. I don't want to lose you. Ren laughed bitterly, without humor. Lose me? You don't own me, Lucian. You can't buy everything. Not this neighborhood, and definitely not me. She stepped forward, her eyes like knives. You made your choice, and it wasn't me. Lucian reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I was wrong, he said, voice hoarse. I'll make it right. I'll stop the project, Ren. Just stay. But Ren shook her head, tears mixing with rain. It's too late, Lucian. I can't trust you anymore. She jumped on her board and skated into the downpour, leaving him standing there, drenched and alone, for the first time in his life, utterly powerless. Are you still following the story? Please leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below. All your comments are the motivation for us to create better stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. A storm raged across Manhattan, rain pounding the streets and wind howling through the alleys. Lucian Thorn gripped the steering wheel of his Bentley, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the blurry road ahead. He hadn't slept since Ren walked out. Her words, "You can't buy everything, Lucian," played on repeat in his head like a haunting melody. He had failed, and now he had to find her, had to tell her he was ready to give up everything to make things right. He drove through the Lower East Side, the alleyways, the community center, the graffiti-covered walls, all soaked and shimmering like the city was crying with him. He stopped in front of the center, stepped out into the storm and yelled into the wind, "Ren!" No answer, just the roar of the storm. He climbed back into the car, mind spinning with memories. The almost kiss in the office, the pain in her eyes, the moment she called him out for choosing power over people. "I'll fix it," he whispered, pressing the gas. But the storm didn't care. From the intersection, headlights flared. A truck barreled through the red light. Lucian turned the wheel, but too late. Metal screamed. Glass shattered, and the world went dark. Ren sat in the alley, soaked through her hoodie, skateboard by her side. She wanted to forget Lucian, forget the way it felt when he betrayed her trust. But then her phone rang, an unknown number. "Elise," she said when she answered. "Miss Callahan." The assistant's voice cracked slightly. "Mr. Thorne. He's been in an accident. He's at St. Luke's." Ren felt her heart stop. "Accident?" she echoed, barely breathing. Elise gave the address, nothing more. Ren snatched her skateboard and flew down the rain-slicked streets, eyes burning, lungs tight. She didn't think. She just went. At the hospital, Ren burst into the ICU, clothes clinging to her, hair dripping. Lucian lay still in the hospital bed, head wrapped in bandages, machines beeping steadily. He looked fragile, no longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man fighting to survive. She sank into the chair beside him, hands trembling as she reached for his. "You idiot," she whispered, tears falling freely. "Why were you out in a storm? Why did you have to scare me like this?" She hadn't known how afraid she was of losing him until now. All their arguments, her nicknames for him, Mr. Fancy Suit, Devil in Silk, they weren't just banter. They were memories she wanted to keep. She held his hand tighter, voice soft and broken. "Don't leave me, Lucian. I haven't told you yet. I need you too." Lucian's eyelids fluttered. He opened his eyes, dazed, but they found her immediately. "Ren," he whispered, barely audible. "Don't go again." Ren choked back a sob, leaning forward until her forehead touched his hand. "I'm here," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." Lucian recovered slowly in the hospital, but his mind never rested. The accident had changed him, not just the scars on his body, but the moment he woke to see Ren by his side, eyes red, her hand gripping his. She had stayed even after everything, and he knew then, more clearly than he ever had before, that Ren was something he couldn't afford to lose. More than any contract, more than any skyscraper. 1 month later, Lucian returned to Thorn Tower, still weak but more determined than ever. He called an emergency board meeting with the investors and executives. Standing in front of the model of the development, the gleaming glass towers that had once been his dream, he made a shocking announcement. "We're terminating the current contracts," he said, voice firm. "The old neighborhood stays. We're rebuilding, but this time it's for the people. Community centers, art spaces, affordable housing. This is no longer a profit-driven project. This is about people." The room erupted in chaos. Some shareholders shouted about losing hundreds of millions, but Lucian stood his ground. "If you disagree, withdraw your investment," he said. "I'll fund it myself." He knew it could ruin his empire, but for the first time, he didn't care. He was doing this for Ren, for the neighborhood, and for himself, the orphan boy who once had nothing but a dream. Ren by now no longer worked for Thorn Enterprises. She had returned to the alleyways, painting again, teaching kids graffiti. She tried not to think about Lucian, but every brushstroke reminded her of him. His deep eyes, his rare smile, the words, "Don't go again," whispered in a hospital room. She told herself she hadn't forgiven him, but her heart told another story. One afternoon, Elise showed up and handed her an invitation. "Mr. Thorne would like you to attend an event," she said. Ren frowned, ready to say no, but curiosity won. She arrived at the address, a cleared lot in the old neighborhood, now strung with soft, glowing lights. A small stage had been built, and Lucian stood atop it, not in a suit, but in a white shirt and jeans, looking more human than ever. "Ren," he said when he saw her, his face lighting up. In front of a crowd of local residents, street artists, and press, Lucian announced the launch of a new artist grant, the Callahan Fund. "This is to honor the girl who changed the way I see the world," he said, locking eyes with Ren. She taught me that a neighborhood isn't just land and brick, it's stories and people. Ren stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. She never imagined Lucienne would go this far, giving up profit, rebuilding the community as she had dreamed, using his power to preserve street art. As the crowd applauded, Lucien stepped down and walked toward her. "I was wrong, Ren," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I want to make it right. Not just for the neighborhood, for you. I don't want to own you, Ren. I just want to be beside you." Ren looked at him, heart racing. She wanted to be angry, to push him away, but she couldn't. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, whispering, "You're such an idiot, Mr. Fancy Suit. But I guess I'm an idiot too, because I love you." Lucien smiled, pulling her closer, and under the twinkling lights they both knew they'd found a new world, one not built by either of them alone, but forged together. Ren Callahan stood in front of the newest building in the Lower East Side, eyes wide with wonder. It wasn't a towering structure like Lucien's other projects, but a modest, thoughtfully designed building. The exterior was covered with carefully preserved graffiti art, and large windows welcomed sunlight inside. The sign above read, "Callahan Gallery." Her name. Her heart thudded in her chest like the whole world had just paused. Lucien had invited her to see something special, but she hadn't expected this. Dressed in her usual paint-streaked hoodie and worn boots, skateboard tucked under one arm, Ren stepped inside. The space was open and bright, with white walls displaying artwork from local street artists, friends, collaborators, and students she had painted beside over the years. But in the center of the room, under a soft spotlight, hung one piece that made her gasp. Her first graffiti mural, painted when she was 16. Messy, emotional, and full of raw heart. She thought it had been destroyed during the near demolition of the community center. She turned and saw Lucien standing behind her. No suit, just a white shirt and jeans, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. How do you have this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I kept it," Lucien said, stepping forward. "When I first saw it, I didn't know it was yours. But I felt something in it, a story. And when I learned it was you, I couldn't let it go. Just like I couldn't let you go." Tears streamed down Ren's cheeks. She rushed into his arms, holding him tight. "You idiot, Mr. Fancy Suit! Who makes me cry like this?" Lucien chuckled, running his fingers through her hair. "I don't want to make you cry, Ren. I want to make you happy." Then he stepped back, dropped to one knee, and pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside wasn't a flashy diamond, but a delicate silver ring holding a small blue stone, carved from her old skateboard, polished to a shine. "Ren Callahan," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you knocked my world off course. I won't promise you the whole world. You already have yours. But I will spend my life building a new one with you. Will you marry me?" Ren covered her mouth, laughing and crying all at once. She nodded through her tears, and Lucien slipped the ring onto her finger. She pulled him up, kissing him beneath the soft lights and vibrant murals. "You're such a romantic fool," she whispered, "but I love you." The crowd outside, artists, neighbors, and Elise, burst into applause. Still holding Lucien, Ren grinned. "Don't think for a second I'm wearing a sparkly wedding dress. Devil in silk." Lucien laughed, wrapping his arms around her. "I don't need a dress, I just need you." Here is the American English translation, with accurate grammar and fidelity to the original meaning. The sky was a flawless blue over the Lower East Side, sunlight pouring across graffiti-covered walls at the community center. Today was Ren Callahan and Lucien Thorne's wedding day, and the small courtyard had been transformed with string lights, wildflowers, and soft linen fabric fluttering in the breeze. There was no grand ballroom or symphony orchestra, but the community center, the place they had rebuilt together, was filled with laughter, music, and the love of the neighborhood residents. Lucien stood at the end of the aisle in a white linen shirt and jeans, relaxed but still undeniably striking. He was nervous, eyes gleaming as he looked toward the entrance where Ren would appear. He had prepared himself for the everyday Ren, hoodie, ripped jeans, and paint-splattered boots, and he didn't mind. To him, she was always the most beautiful storm. But when Wren stepped out, the crowd fell silent before erupting in gasps of surprise. She wore a traditional wedding gown, pure white, with a sheer veil that lightly traced her figure. The dress wasn't extravagant, but its elegant cut highlighted her natural beauty, like a work of art framed by the city streets. Her usually messy brown hair was gently waved and crowned with a wildflower wreath. Her brown eyes sparkled, and her soft smile made it impossible to look away. On her hand, the blue stone ring crafted from an old skateboard glinted in the sunlight, a rebellious signature on her graceful look. Lucian stood frozen, his heart pounding. "Wren," he whispered, voice cracking. "Are you an angel?" Wren approached, cheeks slightly flushed, but her eyes twinkled mischievously. "Don't get dreamy on me, Mr. Fancy Pants," she said, winking. "I just wanted to show you a different version of Wren. But inside, I'm still the girl who'd burn your building down if I had to." The crowd, neighbors, street artists, and even Elise, wiping away tears, burst into laughter. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. A street musician friend of Wren's strummed a soft ballad on his guitar. Wren and Lucian exchanged vows, not poetic but honest. "I used to think I had everything," Lucian said, holding her hand, eyes locked on her gentle face. "But you showed me what it means to really live. I promise to stand by you. Whether you're in a wedding dress or a hoodie, even if you keep calling me a silken demon." Wren smiled, tears glittering in her eyes. "You turned my world upside down, Lucian Thorne," she said softly. "But I promise to love you, whether or not you try to lure me into fancy restaurants. And thank you for making me want to wear a dress today." They exchanged rings and kissed to cheers and applause. Their kiss was tender, yet fierce, as if sealing a future that belonged to both of them. Wren, in her white dress, looked like a fairy tale bride. But when she winked at Lucian, he knew she was still the same bold street girl who had thrown his world off its axis. The wedding reception was an outdoor feast, food truck, tacos, craft beer, and a graffiti wall where kids from the community center could paint freely. Wren and Lucien danced, not a waltz, but a messy, spontaneous dance full of laughter as she playfully tripped him. Her white dress floated in the wind, and Lucian couldn't take his eyes off her. "You look stunning," he whispered, pulling her close. "Don't get used to it," Wren replied, leaning into his chest with a smile. "I might wear a hoodie for our anniversary next year." As night fell, they sat on a wooden bench under a sky full of stars. Wren, still in her wedding gown, rested her head on Lucian's shoulder. "We did it, didn't we?" she asked gently. "Not your world, not mine, but ours." Lucian kissed her hair, the faint scent of wildflowers in the air. "And this world will always have room for wedding dresses, skateboards, and graffiti." Wren laughed, lacing her fingers with his, the blue ring gleaming under the moonlight. They were no longer opposites. They were Wren and Lucian, a love story painted in spray paint, glass, and dreams that refused to fade. 2 years after the wedding, the Lower East Side had become a vibrant art hub with the community center and Callahan Gallery at its heart. Wren Callahan, now Wren Callahan Thorne, was no longer just an anonymous street artist. Her name had appeared in international art magazines, from Art Forum to Juxtapose, hailed as the graffiti flame who redefined street art. But to Wren, success wasn't the press or the praise. It was being able to paint, to live, and to inspire the people around her, especially the kids in the neighborhood. Today marked the opening of the biggest exhibition of her career, Street Stories, hosted at Callahan Gallery. It didn't just showcase her work, but also that of young street artists she had mentored through the Callahan Fund, founded by Lucian. Wren stood outside the building in her signature look, an oversized white shirt, ripped jeans, and paint-splattered boots, still true to herself, even if she had grown to love the dress from that special day. The bluestone ring shimmered on her hand, a reminder of Lucienne and the journey they had shared. Inside the gallery, the walls were bursting with color, graffiti pieces telling stories of the neighborhood, of loss, hope, and love. At the center hung Wren's newest work, a massive painting of the community center, kids painting graffiti, Mrs. Rosa smiling, and a blurred figure of Lucian in the corner, gazing at her with gentle eyes. "Is that me?" Lucian asked, appearing beside her in his usual linen shirt and jeans. No trace of the old Mr. Suit. Ren winked. Yeah, but I made you blurry, so no one thinks you're the main character. This is the neighborhood story, not the millionaires. Lucian laughed, pulling her into his arms. I'm fine being your background, my storm. He kissed her forehead, and Ren leaned into him, soaking in the warmth. The exhibition exceeded expectations. Art critics, collectors, neighborhood locals, and street artists from around the world all gathered. Ren stepped onto the small stage, not nervous at all, even though she once thought she'd freeze in front of a crowd. Thank you all for coming, she said, voice clear. This exhibit isn't about me. It's about the neighborhood that saved me, about the people who gave me a family when I had nothing, and about the man who believed a street rat like me could change the world. She looked at Lucian, her eyes sparkling, and he smiled, heart pounding like the first time he saw her. As she shared her journey from addiction and losing her mother to finding light through art, the room fell silent, then erupted in applause. A critic from the New York Times later wrote, Ren Callahan doesn't just paint. She paints the soul of the streets, and that's why she's a legend. After the event, Ren and Lucian strolled hand in hand through the neighborhood. They stopped by the community center, where kids were painting a new wall under the guidance of a young artist Ren had trained. I did it, didn't I? Ren asked softly, watching the vibrant strokes on the wall. Lucian turned to her, pride in his eyes. You didn't just do it, Ren. You changed everything. This neighborhood, street art, me. I thought I built worlds, but you're the one who created this one. Ren shrugged, her smile radiant. Don't get all poetic on me, Silk Devil. But thank you for keeping my first painting, for believing in me, and for loving even my messiest parts. They sat on a wooden bench, listening to laughter echo around them. Ren pulled out a small spray can, shook it, and grinned at Lucian. Want to paint something? Or are you still scared of getting your shirt dirty? Lucian laughed, snatching the can. Careful, Mrs. Thorne. I might paint better than you. He sprayed a clumsy line on a blank corner of the wall, and Ren burst out laughing, jumping in to help. Together they created a colorful, lopsided heart. As night fell, they stood before the wall, paint on their hands, eyes locked. This world is ours, isn't it? Ren asked, resting her head on his shoulder. Always, Lucian replied, kissing her hair. And you're its greatest artist. Ren smiled, holding his hand, the blue ring glinting under the streetlight. She had made it, not because of headlines or galleries, but because she had turned the streets into murals of hope and made Lucian's heart her home.